At the extreme vertical limits of our planet lie two realms of perpetual ice, yet they are geologically and ecologically antithetical. To understand the difference between the North Pole and the South Pole, one must first look beneath the ice. The North Pole is located in the middle of the Arctic Ocean, a deep basin capped by a shifting layer of sea ice. There is no land at the North Pole. If the ice melted, only water would remain. In contrast, the South Pole sits atop Antarctica, a massive continent twice the size of Australia. This landmass is buried under an ice sheet that averages 2 kilometers in thickness, supported by a bedrock foundation that includes vast mountain ranges like the Transantarctic Mountains, thermodynamics, and altitude. The temperature differential between the two poles is significant. The South Pole is substantially colder than the North Pole. This is due to two primary factors: elevation and thermal inertia. Because the South Pole sits on a high-altitude continental plateau, it is subject to the adiabatic cooling of the atmosphere. It is nearly 3,000 meters above sea level. The North Pole, however, sits at sea level. Furthermore, the Arctic ice floats upon the relatively warm waters of the Arctic Ocean. This water acts as a heat reservoir, absorbing solar radiation and releasing it slowly, which prevents the North Pole from reaching the ultra-low temperatures found in the South. While North Pole winter temperatures may dip to minus 40 degrees Celsius, the South Pole frequently plummets to minus 60 degrees Celsius or lower. The cryosphere. Sea ice versus glacial ice. The behavior of the ice itself differs between the poles. Arctic sea ice is highly dynamic. It is constantly moved by ocean currents and wind, forming pressure ridges and leads of open water. Because it is surrounded by landmasses Eurasia and North America, the ice is trapped, lasting longer through the summer months, though this trend is changing due to climate fluctuations. Antarctica's ice is primarily glacial ice formed from millennia of compacted snow. When this ice reaches the coast, it forms massive ice shelves. Unlike the Arctic, the sea ice that forms around Antarctica in winter is free to expand into the Southern Ocean. This lack of a land boundary means that almost all Antarctic sea ice melts during the summer, whereas the Arctic maintains a core of multi-year ice. Biological diversity and apex predators. The biological divide between the poles is absolute. The most famous distinction is the distribution of megafauna. Polar bears Ursus maritimus are found only in the Arctic, while penguins Sphinicidae are found only in the southern hemisphere, primarily around Antarctica. The Arctic ecosystem is more integrated with the surrounding continents, allowing for land mammals like reindeer, Arctic foxes, and lemmings to inhabit the region. The Antarctic, isolated by the powerful circumpolar current, is a closed biological system. Life there is almost entirely dependent on the sea, with Antarctic krill Euphausia superba serving as the foundational species that supports whales, seals, and seabirds. Geopolitical status. The legal frameworks governing these regions are as different as their topographies. The Arctic is subject to the sovereignty of the nations that border it: Canada, Denmark via Greenland, Norway, Russia, and the United States, leading to complex claims over seafloor resources and shipping routes like the Northwest Passage. The South Pole, however, is governed by the Antarctic Treaty System. Signed in 1959, this international agreement designates the entire continent as a scientific preserve. It prohibits military activity, mineral mining, and nuclear testing, ensuring that the South Pole remains the only continent on Earth without a native human population or sovereign government ownership. Magnetic visas, geographic poles. Finally, it is essential to distinguish between the geographic poles and the magnetic poles. The geographic north and south poles are the fixed points where the Earth's axis of rotation meets the surface. However, the magnetic poles, the points to which compass needles point, are constantly in motion due to the movement of molten iron in the Earth's outer core. Currently, the magnetic North Pole is moving away from the Canadian Arctic towards Siberia at a rate of approximately 55 kilometers per year.